Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om. Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata Narayanena swayam Vyasena gratitam purana munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamrita varshinim bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva manusandadhami Bhagavad Gite bhavatveshinim Namostu te vyasa vishala buddhe Pullara vindayata patra netra Yena tvaya bharata taila purna Prajvalito jnanamaya pradipaha Prapanna parijataya totra vetraika panaye Jnana mudraya krishnaya Gitamrita duhe namaha Sarvopanishado gavo dogdha gopalanandanaha Partho vatsasudhir bhokta dugdham gitamritam mahate Vasudeva sutam devam kamsachanuramardanam Devaki paramanandam krishnam vande jagadgurum Bhishmadrona tatajayadratha jala Gandhara nilotpala Shalyagrahavati kripena vahani Karnena velakula Ashwathama vikarna ghora makara Duryodhana vartini Sottirna kalu pandavairananadi Kaivartakah keshavaha Parasharya vachasaroja mamalam Gitartha gandhotkatam Nanakyanaka kesaram harikatha Sambodhana bodhitam Loke sajjana shatpadairaharaha Pepiyamanam muda Bhuyad bharata pankajam kalimala Pradhvamsina shreyase Mukam karoti vachalam Pangum langayate girim Yat kripatamaham vande paramananda madhavam Yam brahma varunendra rudra marutastunvanti divyaistavai Vedais sangapadakramopanishadair Gayanti yam samagaha Dhyanavasthita tadgatena manasa Pashyanti yam yogino Yastyantam na vidussurasuragana Devaya tasmai namaha Devaya tasmai namaha Devaya tasmai namaha. Welcome to the study of the Bhagavad Gita. We had concluded the 12th study of the 12th chapter of the Gita, but it is traditional to recapitulate what we have studied before venturing into the new chapter. So I would like to spend some time in going through all the chapters that we have studied from chapter 1 to chapter 12. Bhagavad Gita has been divided into shatkas, that means groups of 3. First 6 chapters, 1 to 6, then 7 to 12, then 13 to 18. This is the system of study of the Bhagavad Gita. And our scholars have identified that these 3 groups or divisions have specific theme or specific paths for us. So, according to some scholars, it speaks about the Mahavakya, that means those exhorting words, that is Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art, that you are. So the first 6 chapters deals with Tat Pada, that means the absolute, what is the nature of the divine, or what is the goal of life, we can say. And then the next 6 chapters deal with Tvam, who are you? We always talk about ourselves as I. Who am I? We need to understand, am I just this body? Am I just this mind? Or am I something larger than what I think I am? So that is the theme of this next 6 chapters. We need to remember that all these are not watertight compartments, as it were, but in general, the Bhagavad Gita discusses these 3. And then the third portion of it is pointing out that you are that. You are that. The conclusion of the inquiry of the Supreme or the Divine and the individual, thou, and then how can one become one with the Divine, or how can I realize the Divine? That is the subject matter of the third portion of the Bhagavad Gita. Some scholars also have the opinion that the Bhagavad Gita discusses through these 6 divisions of 6 chapters each, the 3 major paths of spiritual life, that is Karma Yoga, the path of action, Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, and Jnana Yoga, that is the path of knowledge. We see that in the first chapter itself, Arjuna, the warrior, is ready to fight, but then when he comes to the battleground and faces the enemies, amongst whom were some of his own kith and kin, he is unnerved. He becomes very distressed over this, and immediately the thought of flight comes to him. I want to give up. All this time Arjuna was keen on fighting the war and then get back their kingdom and all that, but now that he faces the inevitable, that means when trials and tribulations come in front of you, one tends to become weak-minded. So that is what the first chapter discusses. That is, he faces a moral and emotional crisis, which comes into everybody's life. Definitely it does come. If it doesn't come, then we are either very fortunate or unfortunate. So it must come. In fact, they say that trials and tribulations are the sure signs that you are progressing. There is no doubt about that. So the Bhagavad Gita sets this stage for a person's emancipation or freedom from this chapter, the first Vishada Yoga. He feels Vishada means depression. He ends up in depression, but fortunately for Arjuna, there was his great friend, philosopher and guide, Sri Krishna, who did not let him go deep into that stage. Of course, the other thing is that Arjuna was a person who wanted or who knew that he wants to get free. There was that innate urge in him to become free, to realize what is the ultimate goal of life. Therefore, he surrenders to his friend or teacher. From then onwards, he considers him as his teacher, and he surrenders to him and say, whatever you want me to do, I shall do. Again, Arjuna, just like all of us, has doubts. He keeps on asking questions. For some time he says, I have understood everything that you have said, I will do whatever you want me to do. But again, on the same note, he will again start saying, sorry, I did not understand, there is a doubt in my mind, and what you say is contradictory to each other. Whatever you say, sometimes you are praising jnana, that means actionlessness, and again you are praising action, a life filled with action. So I do not want to understand, I do not understand what to do. So this dilemma comes to us, keeps on coming to us as long as we are totally convinced that the goal of life is not enjoyment, not merrymaking, that the goal of life is to become free, to get out of this cage called samsara or the temporary living. So that is the first chapter. And in the second chapter, Sankhya Yoga, Sri Krishna puts before Arjuna the highest goal of life. This is something very unique to Vedanta or to Indian culture, wherein before going into the details of something, the highest goal is put in front of you. Even if you see the grammar, Sanskrit grammar, where one learns the alphabets and all of that, first then the ideal, the highest ideal of Lord Shiva is put over there. How Lord Shiva started playing his drum, and then all the varnas or all the letters emanated from there. So the goal is there, the highest. So Arjuna is being taught by Sri Krishna in the second chapter about the highest spiritual wisdom that one needs to acquire or one needs to reach. And he teaches about the concept of the eternal self, what is reality, and that he says that the body is a temporary shell, as it were, where we come and stay, live in for some time and then go away. But the eternal self is that which is not destructible. Through that, he is also telling Arjuna, look here, you are afraid that you are going to kill your kith and kin, etc. But have been destroyed by the divine. You just become a nimitta, that means you only become a temporary tool. That's all. After that, the tool will be withdrawn, and then you will become one with the divine. That is the second chapter. And the third chapter, Arjuna is still not convinced. Sri Krishna places before Arjuna the highest goal of life, and also the ideal of a person who has reached to the highest sthita prajna, a person of equanimous status, equanimous state rather. So a person who is unmoved by the sorrows or joys of life, who is unmoved by the pairs of opposites in life, and he puts before him that ideal. And naturally, in Sri Arjuna's mind, the question comes, well, how can I become like that person who has achieved to the highest? Then Sri Krishna enumerates several steps for that, and the first one is karma yoga, which is very common to every one of us, that we have to work, we have to perform all our actions, but perform your actions in a detached manner, that you are not the doer and that the divine is the doer indeed. So when you do such an action in such a spirit, then you will not be attached to the results thereof, good or bad of them. You are not attached to that, and thus you will become free. So that is the karma yoga, the path of selfless action, you do your duty without any attachment. And that's how the Karma Yoga concept begins. Then again, Sri Krishna, being the teacher supreme, he talks to Arjuna about the concept of the higher self. See, great teachers are those who will repeat the important concepts to you again and again. Why? So that it goes deeper into you, it makes grooves in your psyche, and that you will never be able to forget, and that ideal is kept high before, or ideal is kept glowing before your eyes. Therefore, in the 4th chapter, Sri Krishna talks about the knowledge of the Supreme Being. He elaborates on the importance of knowledge and wisdom in one's life. And he also says that here I am, who have been incarnated many times, and I will be incarnating many more times. And the reason for my incarnation is to bring in dharma, virtue, and destroy vice, or destroy that which is immoral. And surrender to the divine will lead you to moksha, or emancipation, or freedom. And in the 5th chapter, very interestingly, Sri Krishna, who had spoken so much about the path of action, speaks about the renunciation of action. Why should karma sannyasa yoga? That sannyasa means renunciation. So that is, renounce the fruits of your action, the results of your actions, and your desires as well. See, we all work, no doubt. And we do it selflessly also. But even while we work selflessly, there is somewhere in our psyche a subtle desire to get some recognition, just a mere thanks. Thank you. We want to be thanked. See? The ideal is very clear. Yes, I am doing the work without having any selfish motive. I do not want any return from it. But there is a subtle desire for this name, fame, or approbation. So this also, Sri Krishna says, is renunciation of the results that are sitting in your mind. In the mind, you are still expecting some result. That subtle desire also must be given up. Extremely hard for us human beings to do this. But Sri Krishna urges Arjuna, through him, us, to renounce this internal desire as well. External desires are okay, but this internal desire, approbation, appreciation, and all of that. If somebody says something that's a criticism, if somebody criticizes me, I become so very upset. I become so depressed as well. I become so emotional over all that, because I am attaching so much of importance to myself as the doer. I am doing the work. You see, I have exerted so much, I have worked so much, and yet I am not being appreciated for what I am doing. See, this is a very, very subtle philosophical argument that Sri Krishna puts over there. As long as you have even a little bit, iota of doubt about the Supreme Being, or about the action of the divine that is happening throughout the universe, so long there will be a little sense of desire in you. One must try and get rid of that root of the desire also. There are great saints who have completely given up this, but for us ordinary human beings, just remembering this concept will do. If somebody doesn't thank us for what we are doing, we may get upset for a little while, but let me bring in this concept of renunciation, total renunciation of action, total renunciation of the fruits of action. We must have to bring it. What if he doesn't acknowledge me? What if he doesn't thank me? I will keep on doing. It is my nature to keep on doing whatever I am supposed to do. Let me be just a mere machine and keep doing what I am supposed to do. That is the renunciation, 5th chapter. And in the 6th chapter, Sri Krishna talks about the science of self-realization. He now brings in the concept of meditation, dhyana, yoga. That means meditation and the importance of the self-discipline in achieving this self-realization. And also he puts before us an example of a yogi who is balanced in life and who is focused in all activities of life. And therefore, Sri Krishna urges us all to go inwards. Our senses are all outward going, but let us turn the light within. We are always shining the light outwards. So take some time in your life and then shine the light inwards. That is the subject matter of the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga. Of course, he gives a lot of tips for us about how to sit, how to meditate, etc. Those are all my details, secondary details. But the goal of that is somehow to focus all of your energies upon the divine, upon God or the divine. In the 7th chapter, which is the second Shatka, that means the second group, Sri Krishna describes the nature of God. What is the nature of the divine? He reveals his own nature as divine, and he also shows to Arjuna both the personal as well as the impersonal aspect of the divine. Personal is with a name, with a form and with a qualities, etc. And the impersonal is that which does not have any of it, but just a concept is there. So that the supreme reality alone has to be cherished in our mind. That is the subject matter of the 7th chapter. And of course, in that same chapter, he asks the aspirant to surrender oneself to the will of the divine. How many of us do that? We know that God is there, but do we surrender ourselves to the will of the divine? Whether you throw me in dirty water or you throw me in clean water, I will remain your servant. I will remain dedicated to you. That is the kind of attitude that Sri Krishna wants us to develop through that chapter. And in the 8th chapter, Sri Krishna speaks about the imperishable Brahman, Akshara Brahman. Whatever we see, whatever we deal with is perishable. That which has a beginning and that which has an end. But only one thing is not perishable, that is the divine. Sri Ramakrishna used to give an example. Everything has been defiled by the tongue as it were. Only Brahman is that which has not been defiled. Defiled means that which has been spoken about, that which has been explained. But can you explain the divine? Can you explain the nature of the divine? No, nobody can explain the nature of the divine, because it's beyond all description. It is beyond all thoughts. That is the subject matter of the imperishable Brahman. And also he gives some tips about how to attain liberation by meditating upon the Supreme Self, the formless aspect of the divine. It's more Advaitic in its nature. That's 8th chapter. And in the 9th chapter, which he calls as the kingly secret, or the most secret teaching, Sri Krishna reveals his divine presence, that he is in every being, and that one should surrender oneself to the divine. So he repeats the same concept in other chapters also, but in this chapter, especially the 9th chapter, he places a lot of importance upon devotion to the divine. And the 10th chapter deals with the divine glories of God. He describes his various manifestations from the beginning of creation. He enumerates how the knowledge has been given to people, and then how he has manifested himself in many forms and names, qualities. And ultimately he says, all beings emanate from me, from the divine. You, me, as such, have no difference. You are calling yourself you, and I am calling myself me. But ultimately there is no difference between you and me. That is the subject matter of the 10th chapter. In the 11th chapter, Sri Krishna reveals his universal form. Arjuna, who only saw his Sri Krishna as his friend and as guide, now sees the universal manifestation of Sri Krishna. He is everywhere, with myriads, with millions of hands, with millions of faces, with millions of limbs. He is manifest everywhere. He is so scared to look at it, and so he begs Sri Krishna to come back to his original form as Krishna. And Sri Krishna understands it, and then he brings his form down to that of Sri Krishna over there. And one thing which he reveals there in that 11th chapter is that all beings are interconnected. And he gives a beautiful example, Sutre Manigana iva. Just like there is a necklace, and pearls are all woven into the necklace. All of them are joined together, but the main joiner of all of them is the thread which runs through it, or the wire or the thread which runs through it. So in the same manner, the whole universe is manifesting or depending upon the divine, but underlying all of the universe is the supreme being, the divine Brahman, or the supreme being. The 12th chapter, which very recently we studied and completed, extols the virtues of devotion, bhakti, and he says that it is the simplest and most effective path to attain to spiritual realization. And in this he enumerates the qualities of a devotee, nearly 35 qualities of the devotee, which we studied in great detail. So, coming to the 13th chapter, as we have seen, all the previous chapters have insisted upon knowing the real nature of the divine. What is the real nature of the divine, and how to meditate upon him as our innermost being. God is one thing which Bhagavad Gita makes very clear is this, that God is not an extraneous being separate from us. God is in and through us. He is there in you, He is there in me, He is there in the stone, He is there everywhere. That is the one underlying factor which Sri Krishna reveals. So he insists that we underline this concept in our lives, that God is everywhere. He is our inner being, He is our inner controller, Antaryamin. That means He is our inner controller. And He gives the example, Tileshu Tailam. Another poet gives the example, Tileshu Tailam. Just as there is the seed, the vegetable seed or the sunflower seed. So you remove the shaft, you remove the external, and then you enter inside kernel, and then you grind it, you will get the oil. So from outside, if you see it, you don't see the oil, but within it there is. In firewood, there is fire within. So in the same way, the divine is the essence in all beings. That is something he says. But having said that, his manifestation is more seen through an avatara or an incarnation. Because in the 8th chapter we have seen that Sri Krishna speaks about the real nature of all beings, Akshara, that which does not wane or wax. Akshara means that which wanes. So it does not wax or wane. You cannot add anything, you cannot take out anything from the divine. Everything is the divine. And he also in that chapter he says, you are not mere bodies or you are not mere minds. You are the supreme being. That essential nature of yourself as the supreme being must be understood. Separate the non-essential from the essentials. If we want to eat some food, for example rice or wheat, we need to separate the kernel or the chaff, chaff from the kernel. So we need to remove that, first of all, remove that non-essential and take what is very essential. This spiritual life is nothing but this separation of the non-essential from the essential. The essential is the divine and divine alone. That must be understood. And in this chapter, the 13th chapter, Sri Krishna points out that the kshetra and the field is there, and then kshetrajna, the knower of the field, is also there. There is the field. That means the universe is nothing but a field. This is a playing field for the Atman. It's playing the games as father, mother, son, and so on and so forth. We are all mere actors in this. But within us there is the essence, that is the divine alone is playing all these games, kshetra and kshetrajna. So he says that after understanding and knowing everything intellectually, that the antaratman or the self is the only thing that has to be sought after, meditate upon intellectually after being convinced that self alone exists, that a self alone is of some consequence, that self alone is of some purpose, then one should meditate upon the divine. One can do so by meditating upon the visible representation of the knower of Atman, like a saint or an incarnation of the divine, or meditate upon the supreme divine. It's difficult for us who are attached to names and forms to meditate upon the formless. Even if we have to think about the divine, the formless divine, we need to conceptualize either an ocean or the sky or an orb of light, whatever it is. That's how we conceptualize the divine. So it is easier for us to connect ourselves to a personality just like ourselves, and then slowly and slowly move towards the divine. And in order to do that, in order to practice this, one must have or one must develop the sense of tyaga. This is a very important theme of the whole of the Bhagavad Gita. Tyaga is, that means renunciation of your individuality, your ego, the little ego. Merge this little ego with the universal ego, with the ego of the divine. This is a central theme of the Bhagavad Gita, tyaga, that means sacrifice or giving up. So, one cannot do it externally. A monk might be able to do it, but everyone can do it internally. So, disassociating the self from the body and the mind. I am the Supreme Being. I am neither the body nor the mind nor the elements. I am the Supreme. I am the Supreme. I am the Supreme. So, this jnana, that all is ultimately the divine, must come to every being by practicing these spiritual disciplines. Of all the spiritual disciplines, tyaga, sacrifice, is one of the greatest. That is the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. In all the yogas that Sri Krishna has enumerated, that is Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga, the primary objective is realization of the self or realization of the divine. But there are subsidiary paths. Just like when you had to come over here, you had to take the highway or the freeway and then come, and then you had to take the subsidiary roads which ultimately lead us to the Vedanta center over here. Similarly, there are subsidiary paths, but ultimately the goal is somehow to reach the destination, making use of the highway or the freeway, which takes you directly to your goal. In the Karma Yoga, for example, the path of action, we become useful to society. Society will make good use of us, but at the same time, we must learn to develop this sense of sacrifice. If I do not give out, I will not be able to receive. Of course, that is give and take. But in spiritual life, giving is more important than receiving. So in Karma Yoga, giving out, that means you are sacrificing your little self, is of great importance. And in Bhakti Yoga, of course, we worship God through an image or a symbol or through a concept. That is all subsidiary to the ultimate goal of loving God. Love God as your very own, your very life force as it were, your very breath as it were. That is the concept of Bhakti Yoga, surrender, total surrender of one's individuality to the divine is the theme of the Bhakti Yoga. And in Jnana Yoga, which we are now going to enumerate from this 13th chapter onwards, the intellect will first analyze things and say, neti, neti, this is not the divine, this is not the divine. But ultimately, you will come to this conclusion that everything is the divine. Iti, iti, iti. Everything is the divine. That is the concept. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of staircase within a house. From downstairs, we will come up to this level over here, and then you take the staircase, and then you see that the materials that are used over there, concrete or wood or steel, whatever it is, they help you to come up to this. And once you come and see, oh, this is also made out of the similar materials as the staircase. So the paths also lead you to the goal, but later you will see that this is also that is also this. This is a great realization. So this, and there won't be any difference between this and that, me and the divine, that distinction, that difference will completely vanish. That is the idea of the Jnana Yoga. The next 6 chapters which we are studying will enumerate this. So we will just get into the study of this chapter, the 13th chapter. In many of the versions of the Bhagavad Gita, the first verse is not there. The first verse is actually a question by Arjuna. So it says, Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetrajnamevacha Etadveditumicchami Jnanam Neyam Cha Keshava. Arjuna asks this question, O Keshava, I desire to learn about Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti is nature and Purusha is the Supreme Self. And I also want to know subjectively Kshetra and Kshetrajna. Kshetra is the field and Kshetrajna the knower of the field. Both are of course the same. So this knowledge must be known and it is something that ought to be known, says Arjuna. This verse is not found in some of the versions of the Bhagavad Gita. But it makes sense that Sri Bhagavan or Sri Krishna answers the questions of Arjuna and that Arjuna has put a question. So it gives us some reference. So we will begin it. We'll just start it and then we will conclude very soon. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramityabhidhiyate Etadyo Vettitam Prahu Kshetrajna iti tadvidaha. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Idam Shariram Kshetramiti Abhidhiyate. This body is termed as Kshetra, that means the field, because the fruits of action are reaped in it. Whatever we do, we enjoy or we suffer. There's no doubt about that. So he says this field, this body is the field. And he says, Etat yo vetti. He who knows it has his property. Means, I know this body as mine, as my property. See, just as the glass case, the case of the spectacles, is mine, I will say mine, because I use it, and therefore. But after some time, when my power changes, or when I do not need it anymore, then I will throw it. That which I was associating with myself as mine, ultimately has to be thrown away. It has to be given away. So what remains is the I, the me. That me has to be found out. Who is that me? And this body is nothing but a case. It is just a glass case, we can say, a spectacle case. So that is what he is talking about. He who knows it as his property, it is just a mere property. I may be driven out of this property any time. I may be sent away, but I should know that it is a mere possession and that possessions can be taken away from you. So that is how Sri Krishna begins this subject. So say those well versed in this subject. idam shariram kaunteya. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yattad jnanam matam mama. Know me, O scion of the Bharata race, to be the kshetrajna, the spirit in all kshetras bodies. That is, I am in every being. That is the idea. The knowledge of the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna alone is real knowledge according to me. The real knowledge is, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that is knowledge which will reveal to you that God alone is real and all else is unreal. That is real knowledge. Unreal in the sense it is temporary and that it doesn't have any locus, it does not have any permanence at all. It is just there. As I gave the example, I am here to use it for some time. After the use, it is gone. But the knowledge about my real nature is that which will remain with me forever. Until this breath is gone, that knowledge will remain with me and then I merge with the Absolute. That is how Sri Krishna begins this chapter, and we will study this in greater detail in the future weeks when we gather here on Sundays. Thank you. Om Shantakaram Bhujagashayanam Padmanabham Suresham Vishwadharam Gaganasadrusham Meghavarnam Shubhangam Lakshmikantam Kamalanayanam Yogiridhyanagamyam Vande Vishnum Bhavabhayaharam Sarvalokaikanatham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.